Okay, so we're recording for the online kids. You're on page 19 in your workbook. Now, we need to fill in these definitions before we can look at the examples. So who can tell me, what is a comparison using like or as? Good, a simile. So we're just going to fill that in. And then a comparison not using like or as. What's good, Cody? Thank you. So we got a metaphor. And then the third one, giving human qualities to non-human objects. Personification. Okay. I think I'm going to run out of space. Whoops. And then this one may be a little new. I think it was on your lit terms. Eli thinks that he knows it. It's an exaggeration to prove a point. Good. It is a hyperbole. Not a hyperbole. It's a hyperbole. Don't say that, Will. Don't break my heart.
So you get a Chipotle or something.
What?
The hyperbole.
A hyperbole. You might get a hyperbole at Chipotle. I do like Chipotle a lot, and I have a 12-year-old brother, and whenever he sees it, he's like, Chipotle. We gotta go to Chipotle. He insists on calling it that. Okay, so we've got a hyperbole. That's one of our newer terms. It's an exaggeration to prove a point. What would be an example of a hyperbole? These are sometimes hard to think about. What, Eli? I was dying of hunger. Now, you've probably said that before and felt like it was true, but was it true? Probably not. So, in your book, keep your workbook open, but in your book, go ahead and turn to page 134. We're going to look at pages 134 and 135 and identify and analyze the figurative language. So we're going to, when we find an example, whether it's a simile, a metaphor, personification, or a hyperbole, we're going to write the quote down, and then we're going to include the page and type, and then we're going to ask, what is the author trying to show the reader? Because when we see figurative language, it's always in there for a reason. You may think it's in there just to confuse you. It's not. The author puts it in there to show us something, and we've just got to figure out what it is. So I'm on page 34, and I'm going to start right after it says Jesus, Mary. I'm going to start that next paragraph. So it says, she said it out loud. The words distributed into a room that was full of cold air and books. Books everywhere. Each wall was armed with overcrowded yet immaculate shelving. It was barely possible to see the paintwork. There were all different styles. Styles and sizes of lettering on the spines of the black, the red, the gray, the every colored books. It was one of the most beautiful things Liesl Neminger had ever seen. Now, in that paragraph, who can find a hyperbole? Anybody see one? CJ, what do you think? Good. We're actually going to put that in our next box. CJ pulled out the example of figurative language that said, each wall was armed with overcrowded yet immaculate shelving. Can you actually arm a wall? No. So what's that going to be? Good. Personification. So we're going to go ahead and put that one here. So we've got each wall was armed. And I'm just going to, I'm only writing the first part of the quote. You can do exactly the same thing. You don't have to write the whole sentence. And I'm going to put a P for personification. Now, what do you think that the author here is trying to show us? Are there a lot of books everywhere or just a few books?
Yeah, a lot.
There are a ton of books in there. So we could say that this figurative language shows how there are books everywhere. In fact, that's our next literary device. We also have a hyperbole. When she says books everywhere. think that's a hyperbole. Because did she walk in and like there's absolutely nothing, she can't see anything else, it's just books? No, there's still furniture, there's still a window. So this is a bit of an exaggeration to say that there were books everywhere. But again, it's just showing us how many books there are. So we're going to continue with the next paragraph. With wonder, she smiled that such a room existed. Even when she tried to wipe the smile away with her forearm, she realized instantly that it was a pointless exercise. She could feel the eyes of the woman traveling her body, and when she looked at her, they had rested on her face. There was more silence than she ever thought possible. It extended like an elastic, dying to break. The girl broke it. Like an elastic. What literary device is that? Good. It's a simile. Now it's actually, we've got two devices in that sentence. So, I just can't hear you, Kevin. What did you say? Good. That's a good one, too. You could write that down. The eyes were traveling, so that could also be personification. If you see one and I haven't written it down, please feel free to write it down. There's just so many, I couldn't put them all on the board. Cody, what were you going to say? Yes, you can. Thanks for asking. Just make sure the door's cracked or it'll lock. Okay, so I'm going to write this one down. It says, it extended like an elastic, dying to break. So the simile is like an elastic, but it's talking about silence. It says that the silence was dying to break, so it's also personification. So we got a 2-for-1 deal here. Now, when Liesl is in this library, who is she there with? Do you remember from your reading?
The mayor's wife.
Good. So it's the mayor's wife. So she's walked into the library. It's Liesl and the mayor's wife. Things are silent between them. It says the silence extended like an elastic, dying to break. Is this like a good, calm silence where everything's happy, or is it tense?
Yeah.
It's tense. And so this figurative language shows us that the silence is tense. And the mayor's wife, her first name is Ilsa. So we've got 2 in that one sentence. Okay, we're going to continue with the rest of this page. Can I? She asked. The 2 words stood among acres and acres of vacant wooden floored land. The books were miles away. The woman nodded. Yes, you can. Now, in that section that we just read, can anyone identify the hyperbole? Nicholas, what do you think? Good. So at the very end of page 134, we've got another hyperbole. The books were miles away. Now, when Liesl says this, were the books actually miles away?
Yeah.
No, she's in the same room with them. But what is the author trying to show us? Does Liesl feel like she can access those books? No, the books feel unreachable to her. Because who do they belong to?
Miss whatever her name is.
The mayor's wife, Miss Ilsa. So we're going to say the books feel unreachable. Once you've got that finished, we'll start at the top of page 135. My glasses are fogging up. Okay, next page. Steadily the room shrank, till the book thief could touch the shelves within a few small steps. She ran the back of her hand along the first shelf, listening to the shuffle of her fingernails gliding across the spinal cord of each book. It sounded like an instrument, or the notes of running feet. She used both hands. She raced them, one shelf against the other, and she laughed. Her voice was sprawled out high in her throat, and when she eventually stopped and stood in the middle of the room, she spent many minutes looking from the shelves to her fingers and back again. Okay, so in that first paragraph, what do you see? Gabe, what do you see? Good. The room shrank. What would we say? S, P, H, or M? It's going to be, I guess we could say either. It could be personification, because we're saying the room is shrinking. And it could also be a hyperbole, because we're saying it's shrinking and it's not. So that's an exaggeration. Who can identify the simile in that paragraph? Good. So we're going to write that one down. We've got a simile. It extended like an instrument. Or it sounded like an instrument. Excuse me. So 134. Oh, yes. Thank you, Will. 135. Oh, no. It won't erase. So 135. It sounded like an instrument. Now, what do you think the author is trying to tell us with that? Is it a good noise or a bad noise? Good. Most people would say good. In fact, they would probably say if it sounded like an instrument, it is making a joyful noise. And for sure, to Liesel, it's a beautiful noise. I'm going to keep reading with the next question. What is the one piece of figurative language or example that we haven't found yet? Metaphor. So we're looking for a metaphor. How many books had she touched? How many had she felt? She walked over and did it again, this time much slower, with her hand facing forward, allowing the dough of her palm to feel the small hurdle of each book. It felt like magic, like beauty, as bright lines of light shone down from a chandelier. Several times she almost pulled a title from its place, but didn't dare disturb them. They were too perfect. Okay, I'm not going to write it on the board because we've only got one box left, but like magic, like beauty, as bright lines, what are those? Good, they're similes. To her left, she saw the woman again, standing by a large desk, still holding the small tower against her torso. She stood with a delighted crookedness. A smile appeared to have paralyzed her lips. Okay, in this paragraph, metaphors are tricky to catch because we don't have any clue words, but in this paragraph, we have a metaphor. Not paralyzed her lips, because that would be personification. Look back at the other sentence. She saw the woman again, standing by a large desk, still holding the small tower. Now the key here, what is the small tower that she's holding? Is she actually holding like the Eiffel Tower in front of her?
Books.
Good, Kevin. It's a tower of books. And so that's our metaphor. On page 135, when she says, I'm just going to put some ellipses, the 3 dots, still holding the small tower. And I'm just going to make a note to myself that that small tower refers to books. It's not the Eiffel Tower. It's not a Lego tower. It's not anything else. It's a tower of books. And so that's our metaphor. Yes, Nicholas?
My sister has a Lego Eiffel Tower.
Does she? That's very cool.
I helped her build it.
That's good.
And also, if you try to build a too tall Lego tower, it just...
Yeah, we've done lots of those at my house too. So with this tower of books, what is he describing? Is it a lot of books or a few books? It's a lot of books. So all these examples of figurative language work together to allow us to picture what Liesl is seeing. So once you've got that last one written down, flip over to the back. This will be page 20. There's 2 questions that we need to answer.
fingernails across the spinal cord and would that also be there?
That could definitely be one too. Good catch. Okay, so let's look at the first question. How is the figurative language in this excerpt effective? Now, excerpt just means passage, right? So we've looked at 2 pages. That's our excerpt. How is it effective? Meaning, does it work? What does it do? Why does the author include it? Support with evidence from the text. So what I want you to do, while I erase the board so we can write these answers down, is I want you to go ahead and answer that question on your own. Just do your best shot. We're still going to go over it, but I want you to write an answer down. So take a couple of seconds. I'm going to erase the board and get us on the right page, and you write your answer down. How is the figurative language effective? Why does the author include it? Marker. Go back. Anybody want to take a shot? What do you think? How is the figurative language in this excerpt effective? First off, do we think it does what he set out to do? Does it work? Maybe. I've got some maybes. I want us to think of it this way. The figurative language helps to create the mood. Do you remember what mood is? Good. Warren says that it creates imagery, which is going to be the second thing that I wrote down. It allows the reader to picture what she is seeing. I'm going to run out of space. But it allows us to see what Liesl sees. Marcus Zusak, the author, could have taken these 2 pages and just said, you know what? Liesl visits the mayor's wife. Turns out she has a lot of books. Liesl really likes books. But that would not have been as effective. When we use this figurative language, it allows us to see it, to understand where she's coming from, and allows us to create a mood. We share what Liesl is experiencing. And so this brings us to question 2. What mood is created through the figurative language? Is it a good mood or a bad mood? What, Kevin? Kind of in the middle. She is excited about the books, right? But she doesn't know at the beginning if she's going to be able to read them. But in the end, when the mayor's wife says, no, you take one, please read them, we have a exhilarated mood. Anybody know what exhilarated means? Good. Extremely happy, joyful. And how does the author create a joyful mood? Does he use positive descriptions or negative descriptions? He uses positive descriptions. I'm just going to make a plus sign for my positive. If he described everything as being the absolute worst, the library smelled, the books were old, they had fallen out of their shelves, they were covered in mold, it would not be a joyful mood. But everything is painted in a positive light, and so Liesel's excitement becomes our excitement. Now, the last thing that I want you to do is I want you to look at the second half of the page. It says, your turn, create an example of figurative language that captures the mood and Liesel's feelings on these pages. I want you to do these on your own. So you're going to make a metaphor, you're going to make a simile, an example of personification, and a hyperbole. And I'm going to give you one freebie. If there's one that you get stuck on, you're like, I cannot do this, you can cross out one. Does that help you? So instead of all 4, do 3. And if you are online, this is going to be the page that you submit for your notes grade today. So you'll just submit this page so I can check your figurative language.